This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. This is flyer number 215, entitled Refuting the MGTOW 51% Female Voter Argument. Description. This flyer shows how the standard argument used by the MGTOW to not bother being political, unlike the Masculists, can be refuted by using Masculist ideas to so change the gender climate that about 65% of the population votes for menfairing the gender laws, that is, persuading a lot of women to become female Masculists in order to get men's attention back. The flyer itself. Refuting the MGTOW 51% female voter argument by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channels De Garis Masculist MGTOW flyers and De Garis essays. The sharpest ideological difference between the MGTOWs and the Masculists is that the MGTOWs are apolitical and the Masculists are very political, angry, and place heavy moral pressure on their enemies, the fluffy parasites, the fluffy feminist hypocrites, and the truly hated gender politicians, to accept Masculist ideas. The MGTOWs argue that the tactics of the Masculists are a waste of time and energy and hence are stupid, due to the MGTOW 51% female voter argument, which says that 51% of voters in the US are female and that more women vote than men. So that if some gender issue, for example divorce reform, that would menfair the divorce courts, were a zero-sum game between women and men, then the gender politicians would vote in favour of women because they know that women make up the majority of the voters who actually vote. So that taking a pro-masculist political stance would get these gender politicians voted out by the female bloc vote. This argument sounds plausible at first sight, so this flyer is devoted to refuting it, attempting to convert those wavering MGTOWs who think that MGTOW should do more politically to help other men in their suffering due to the gynocentric oppression of the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, the hated feminazi bitches. As a Masculist, this 51% female voter argument is the thorn in my side, so it needs to be refuted if that is at all possible. If it can't be refuted, then the MGTOWs have a point, and their strategy of simply, quietly, apolitically going their own way, refusing to marry, refusing to have kids, spending their money on themselves, utterly rejecting paying for a woman who is ignored by MGTOWs as a matter of policy, perhaps pumped and dumped but never paid for, may be the only thing that men can do. But as a Masculist, I disagree with this MGTOW fatalism. There are, however, a string of Masculist counter-arguments that refute the 51% female voter argument that this flyer presents and discusses. So can the Masculists overcome this argument? The answer is, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. For example, it depends on how effective the Masculists are in getting on the broadcast media, persuading male journalists to present the Masculist ideas to the masses, to the millions, and worldwide to the billions. It depends on how effective the Masculists can become at persuading the general population that parents need to socialise their daughters and that teachers need to teach their female students to FIP up, that is, become FIPs, financially independent persons, so that they do not become fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to be able to parasite off a man as adults. If the Masculists can change the gender climate so thoroughly that nearly all young women become FIPs and agree with the Masculists that fluffies should be seen as being immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin, then the Masculists will have a good shot at overcoming the 51% female voter argument. There are several strong arguments that the Masculists have that can be used to change the gender climate so as to refute the 51% argument. The first is the most powerful, but will take some time to become really effective. It's the nuclear weapon that is the strongest argument of the Masculists and the MGTOW, called the population annihilation argument, which goes as follows, quote, "If the gender politicians don't menfair the gender laws, for example, make divorce law menfair, bring in the PARA, that's paternity rejection right, equivalent to women's MARA, maternity rejection right, aka abortion right, menfairing the gender laws across the board, then the Masculists and MGTOW will continue to reject paternity and hence wipe out whole populations. Since there's nothing more important to human beings than the survival of human beings, this most powerful of the Masculist arguments will eventually prevail. The hated gender politicians will be forced to menfair the gender laws, or the gender politicians will be assassinated. When populations seriously start falling badly, this desperate situation will demand desperate measures, such as assassination of the gender politicians. Tremendous moral and political pressure will be placed on the gender politicians to treat men with equal dignity and respect, as they do for women. Otherwise, it will cost them their lives, as vigilante groups take the law into their own hands, given that the current law is so heavily gynocentrically biased. The next powerful Masculist argument is the "we men have the financial power to force women to FIP up" argument. A fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can manage to get her financial claws into some gullible, ignorant manslave who has not had his Masculist/MGTOW consciousness raised. However, thanks to the many YouTube videos made by the MGTOWs and Masculists, young men in a string of major countries have now woken up to how toxic the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, the hated feminazi bitches, have made the divorce courts for men. So that in countries such as the US, Japan, Germany, etc., 2/3 of young men under 35 are now MGTOW in practice, if not in philosophy. That is, they refuse to marry, refuse to have kids, and avoid fluffies like the plague. Unfortunately, the MGTOWs do not make an effort to contact the broadcast journalists to persuade them to teach young women to FIP up or to rot on the shelf. Masculists, on the other hand, do make the effort to do this as a matter of policy. In a decade, probably over 90% of young men will refuse to pay for fluffies, so that fluffies will be forced to FIP up or be spat at by men. So women don't have a choice. Some feminazis naively believe that women have a choice whether to be careerists or to be housewives. No, they don't. If men don't agree to be manslaved by fluffy parasites, then fluffies will rot on the shelf, utterly rejected by men. It's the men who have the power to decide whether some women will be housewives, since housewives are paid for by manslaves, whose supply is almost dried up. Another strong Masculist argument is the "be FIP or be manless" argument, that is related to the previous argument. Masculists place enormous moral pressure on fluffies to FIP up, to get a career-competent education at high school and college, so that they can be FIPs as adults and pull their own financial weight and not parasite off the money of a man. Masculists tell women that they will be viewed as immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin if they become fluffies and not FIP up. There's a long way to go in this regard, because in the US, for example, about 3/4 of young women at age 16 choose the intellectually easy, intellectually lazy, soft option of studying memory-based, non-analytical majors such as English literature, geography, languages, etc., instead of math and the sciences. This results in these young women being forced to study more fluffy crap at college because they are rejected from studying STEM, S-T-E-M, science, tech, engineering, math majors and the professions, because they do not have the appropriate high school prerequisites, resulting in them getting a fluffy crap diploma, which will make them fluffies in their 30s when their biological clocks are ticking hard. So they then look around for some gullible manslave to parasite upon, to have him pay for the middle-class house that she can raise her kids in. A decade later, she will drag him through the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court system and have him financially massacred, taking his kids, his house, half his possessions, forced to pay child support and often alimony, with no moral or legal obligation on her to fip up and get a job. Masculists are pushing hard for the establishment of masculist groups in every high school and college so that young men can put powerful moral pressure on women to fip up, to study career-competent majors or be rejected by men. Masculists aim, with the above arguments, to change the gender climate, that is, to make both sexes aware that men's lib means business, and that if women don't fip up and help menfair the gender laws, then women are going to be severely punished by men by not having one. Men will merely pump and dump women and leave them rotting on the shelf. Another argument the masculists and MGTOWs use is the, quote, when the sex bots and the art wombs come in a decade or so, women will be ignored. This will cause women to become female masculists in order to attract men's interest. When men can get better sex from their sex bots and can grow their own kids, women will become largely irrelevant to men. Feminism will die out quickly, and women will be fighting each other desperately for men's dwindling attention. It will become strongly in women's self-interest to become female masculists, to help the masculists to push the gender politicians to menfair the gender laws. Otherwise, the masculists and MGTOWs will continue to ignore women, who, after all, have severe negative qualities. For example, nagging, being irrational, emotional, hysterical, etc. Thinking women will become well informed of masculist/MGTOW ideas, and some of them will agree with the masculists that men need to be treated ethically and not be abused by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites who want equal rights with men but reject equal obligations with men, that is, sharing the burden of earning the living by bothering to educate themselves with career competent majors so that they can become FIPs as adults and not expect fluffy style to be able to parasite off the money of a man. These sympathetic women will be female masculists and will want to help men achieve gender equality with women concerning the gender laws, which is far from being the case in today's world, especially in the divorce courts and the lack of a para, etc. So, putting all these arguments together, the 51% figure will be significantly lowered. There will be many female masculists who will want men to be given equal rights with women, so that men will be more prepared to interact with women, to sex women, to give women babies. The gender climate will be very different a decade from now as the masculist/MGTOW ideas spread, so that nearly all women and men know about them and are influenced by them. Gender politicians, being politicians, will feel the moral pressure on them from both sexes. They will sense which way the gender wind is blowing and become more prepared to menfair the gender laws when they see that more and more women are turning to female masculism than is the case today. When, say, 30% of women are female masculists and nearly 50% of men are, then that's 65% of the electorate who are in favour of menfairing the gender laws, so they will be menfaired if the gender politicians do not want to lose their next election. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube flyers, de GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, and de GARIS essays. Ciao.